Look at her. Jerome Williams roared, the sound echoing off the marble walls of the dining room like a thunderclap. He grabbed a crystal wine glass and hurled it. It didn't just break. It disintegrated against the hardwood floor just inches from his mother's feet. She doesn't even flinch. There's nothing left inside that head, Isabella. We are babysitting a statue. Eunice Williams didn't blink. She didn't jump. She sat in her high-backed velvet chair, her eyes fixed on a singular, microscopic scratch on the mahogany table. Inside, her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but she forced her muscles to remain slack and her gaze vacant. She was a woman who had built Williams Global from a two-room office into a multi-billion-dollar empire, and she was currently giving the performance of her life. "Jerome, stop it," Isabella whispered, though she didn't move to comfort her mother. She stood near the window, adjusting her diamond earrings in the reflection of the glass. "She's sick. The doctors said the shock of Dad's death caused a total psychological retreat. She's there, but she can't find the door to come back out." "She's there enough to be blocking my vote on the board," Victor said, his voice cold as he stepped into the room. Victor was the eldest, the one Eunice had groomed to take her place. But as she watched him now through her peripheral vision, she didn't see a leader. She saw a vulture. He walked to the head of the table, her chair, and pulled it back with a screech that set Eunice's teeth on edge. "The guardianship hearing is in 3 weeks," Victor continued, stepping over the broken glass Jerome had created. "If she remains like this, the judge will hand the keys to us. But until then, we have a problem. The board want a wellness check. They want to see that the grand matriarch is being cared for by her loving family. If they see us shouting at her, we lose the company." "Cared for?" Jerome laughed. He leaned down, bringing his face inches from Eunice's. She could smell the sharp tang of expensive gin on his breath. "How do you care for a ghost, Victor? We should put her in the maid's quarters behind the kitchen. It's out of the way. We'll hire someone cheap to keep her fed. We tell the world she's on a spiritual retreat in the mountains while we fix the books." "A nurse?" Isabella asked, finally looking away from her reflection. "Won't they talk?" "Not if we hire someone desperate," Victor replied. "Someone who need the paycheck more than they need a conscience." Eunice felt a cold shiver run through her, but she didn't let it reach her skin. Desperate, cheap, out of the way. These were her children, the people she had protected, funded, and loved for decades. She had built a kingdom for them, and they were already measuring her for a coffin. The room they moved her to was a far cry from her master suite. It was a small, cramped space near the industrial kitchen, meant for the help. "This is Maya," Victor said, his voice echoing in the small room 2 days later. Maya was young, perhaps 24, with dark, tired eyes and hands that looked like they had spent a lifetime scrubbing. She wore a faded blue uniform and clutched a small canvas bag. She looked at Eunice, really looked at her, and for a second, Eunice felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in weeks, genuine humanity. "She doesn't speak," Victor told Maya, his tone dismissive as if he were describing a piece of faulty machinery. "She doesn't move much. Just make sure she's clean and fed. Don't bother with conversation. It's a waste of breath. If she has a fit, call me. Otherwise, keep her in this room and keep the door shut." Victor turned and walked out, his expensive leather shoes clicking away down the hall without a single backward glance at the mother who had bought them for him. The silence that followed was different from the silence in the dining room. Maya didn't sigh in annoyance. She didn't pull out her phone to check social media. She walked slowly to the window and wrestled with a rusted latch until it groaned open, letting in the smell of the garden and the sound of distant birds. "That's better," Maya whispered. She turned to Eunice and didn't stand over her like a judge. She pulled up a small wooden stool and sat down so they were eye to eye. "Hello, Mrs. Williams. My name is Maya. It's very loud in this house, isn't it? Even when people aren't talking, the air feels heavy with all the things they aren't saying." Eunice stayed vacant, but she felt a strange warmth in her chest. "I'm going to make you some tea," Maya said, her voice like a soft melody. My grandmother used to say that chamomile can't fix a broken heart, but it can make the night a little shorter. I'll be right back." As Maya left, Eunice closed her eyes for a split second. She's the one, Eunice thought. She's the only person in this house who isn't trying to steal my soul. Dinner in the Williams household had become a battlefield of greed. Eunice was forced to sit at the end of the table while her children ignored her existence. "The shares are dropping," Isabella snapped, stabbing a piece of steak. "If we don't get the signature on the merger by Friday, Jerome's gambling debts are going to be the least of our problems." "She won't sign," Jerome yelled, slamming his hand on the table. He turned to Eunice, his eyes wild. "Mom, just scribble. Give us a mark. You're ruining my life by sitting there like a vegetable." Eunice remained a statue, though her blood was boiling. "Wait," Victor said, his voice dangerously low. "Let's see if the Iron Queen is really gone, or if she's just playing us." He picked up a heavy silver pitcher of ice water. Slowly, with a cruel, experimental smile, he began to pour it over Eunice's head. The cold hit her like a physical blow. The ice cubes clattered against her skull and fell into her lap. The freezing water soaked through her silk blouse, chilling her to the bone. Eunice's entire body screamed to gasp, to jump up and slap Victor, to scream for them to stop. She did nothing. She stayed perfectly still, the water dripping off the tip of her nose and onto her chest, her eyes fixed on the empty space in front of her. Maya let out a muffled cry and rushed forward with a linen napkin. "Sir, stop. You'll give her pneumonia. She's human." "Get back, Maya." Victor barked. "We're testing her sensory responses. If she can't feel cold, she can't manage a company. It's for the court record." The three of them laughed. It was a hollow, ugly sound that echoed off the marble walls. They laughed at their mother while she sat there drenched and shivering in the drafty room. Maya ignored Victor. She wrapped her own threadbare sweater around Eunice's shoulders, her hands trembling with fury. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry, ma'am." Eunice looked into Maya's eyes for a second. She saw something she hadn't seen in her own children's eyes for years. She saw love. Late that night, Maya entered the small room. She thought Eunice was asleep. She sat in the chair by the bed and let out a long, shaky sigh, burying her face in her hands. "I know you're in there," Maya whispered to the dark room. "I saw your hands under the table today. You were gripping the wood so hard your fingers were white. You felt that water, didn't you? You felt the ice." Eunice stayed still, her heart racing. "I hate them," Maya said, her voice breaking into a sob. "I hate the way they look at you. My little sister, Sophia, she's only 6. She has a hole in her heart. I'm only here because Victor promised me a bonus that would pay for her surgery if I helped them build the case for your guardianship. But I can't do it. They want me to lie, Mrs. Williams. They want me to sign a log saying you're aggressive, that you've lost your mind, so they can lock you away in facility." Maya took Eunice's hand. Her palm was warm and callous from a life of hard work. "I'm not going to do it. I'll find another way to save Sophia. I won't help them kill your spirit just to save my own. You aren't a statue to me. You're a mother." Eunice felt a lump form in her throat that was almost impossible to suppress. She wanted to open her eyes and tell Maya that Sophia's surgery was already paid for, that the moment the Queen returned to her throne, Maya would never have to scrub a floor again. But she had to wait. The vultures were circling, and the trap had to be perfect. "I'll be here," Maya whispered, "no matter what they do." As Maya left, Eunice looked at the brick wall outside her window. The rain was coming down now, a cold, cleansing storm. She smiled. The Iron Queen was no longer just faking a silence. She was preparing a storm of her own. The atmosphere in the Williams estate shifted from neglect to something far more sinister. Now that the children believed their mother was a hollow shell, they stopped hiding the rot in their own lives. The mansion, once a symbol of Eunice's hard work, had become a carcass, and her children were the vultures tearing at the meat. Eunice spent her days in the small room by the kitchen, a space that felt like a bunker. But every evening, she was dragged out to the dining room to serve as a silent prop for their meetings. The offshore accounts are drained. Victor! Jerome screamed, throwing a stack of bank statements onto the table. It was barely 7 p.m., but the room already smelled of Jerome's heavy drinking. I owe the Vegas group $4 million by the end of the month. They don't care about guardianship hearings. They want their money now. Then sell your Ferrari, Jerome, Victor replied without looking up from his tablet. I'm trying to finalize the merger with Thorn Industries. If I pull this off, the Gable name will be gone, and I'll be the sole chairman of the new board. Your gambling debts will be pocket change. And what about me? Isabella interjected, her voice sharp as a razor. She was wearing a pearl necklace that Eunice recognized instantly. It had been a gift from Eunice's late husband on their 30th anniversary. I have a reputation to maintain. I can't be seen in last season's fashion because our dear mother is sitting on the trust funds like a dragon on gold. Eunice sat at the foot of the table, her face a mask of vacant indifference. But inside, her mind was a steel trap, recording every confession, every debt, and every betrayal. She looked at Isabella wearing her pearls and felt a cold, sharp clarity. These were not children. They were parasites. The cruelty reached a new peak on a Tuesday afternoon. Eunice was sitting in her small room when Isabella walked in, followed by a man in a cheap suit carrying a jewelry loop. "Over here," Isabella said, gesturing toward Eunice as if she were a mannequin. "She's wearing the wedding band. It's a 5-carat marquise. I need an appraisal today." Eunice felt Isabella's cold, thin fingers grab her hand. Isabella tugged at the gold band, the ring Eunice's husband had placed on her finger 4 to 5 years ago. It hadn't left her hand since the day he died. "It stuck," Isabella hissed, pulling harder. "Mom, relax your hand. You're being difficult on purpose." Eunice kept her hand limp, but her heart was screaming. "Not the ring. Anything but the ring." "Use some soap, Isabella," the appraiser suggested, looking uncomfortable. Isabella ignored him. She grabbed a pair of pliers from a nearby toolkit the maintenance man had left. "I don't have time for soap. I have a gala at 8. "Stop." Maya burst into the room, her face flushed with indignation. She shoved herself between Isabella and Eunice, shielding her mother's hand. "You can't do that. You'll break her finger. That ring belongs to her. That ring belongs to the estate, and I am the estate." Isabella shouted, her eyes flashing with a terrifying greed. "Get out of my way, you little peasant. Or do I need to remind Victor why we hired you?" "I don't care why you hired me," Maya cried, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "I am a nurse, and my patient is being abused. If you touch her again, I will call the police. I don't care who you are." Isabella stepped back, stunned by the defiance. She looked at Maya, then at her mother's vacant face, and let out a huff of pure venom. "Fine. Keep the ring for now. It'll be worth even more when we're fitting her for shroud." As Isabella swept out of the room, Maya sank to the floor, clutching Eunice's hand. She began to cry, not for herself, but for the woman she was protecting. "I'm so sorry," Maya whispered into Eunice's palm. "I'm so sorry they're your children. No one should be treated like this. No one." Eunice felt a warmth spread through her chest that countered the coldness of Isabella's touch. She wanted to speak. She wanted to tell Maya that the ring was just gold, but the heart that defended it was worth all the diamonds in the world. The 3rd week of the experiment brought the ultimate betrayal. Victor arrived at the house with a man Eunice knew all too well, Dr. Aries Thorne, the rival CEO who had been trying to dismantle Williams Global for a decade. They met in the library, thinking the silent witness in the corner couldn't understand the gravity of their words. "The merger is a front, Aries," Victor said, leaning back in Eunice's favorite leather chair. "Once the guardianship is granted, I'll sign over the pharmaceutical patents to you for a fraction of their value. In exchange, you give me 20% of Thorn Industries under a shell company. My siblings get the real estate, and I get the power." And your mother? Thorne asked, glancing at Eunice. She's a liability, Victor said, his voice flat. The day after the hearing, she's being moved to a facility in the desert. Low to high sedation. She won't last a year in a place like that. By the time anyone notices she's gone, Williams Global will be a memory. Thorne smiled. You're a cold man. Victor, your mother would be proud of your ruthlessness. My mother taught me that legacy is everything, Victor replied. She just didn't realize that she was the only thing standing in the way of mine. Eunice sat in the shadows of the library, her eyes fixed on a book she wasn't reading. A year. They think I won't last a year. She felt a surge of energy, a face burning will to live that she hadn't felt in decades. They weren't just planning to steal her company, they were planning her murder. The night before the hearing, the storm outside the mansion mirrored the one inside Eunice's soul. The wind howled through the eaves, and the rain lashed against the windows of her small room. Maya came in late, carrying a small bowl of soup. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at Eunice, her eyes filled with a desperate light. They are going to win, aren't they? Maya whispered. I saw the papers. Victor has a judge in his pocket. Tomorrow, they're taking you away. They told me my services won't be needed at the new facility. She looked down at her hands. I failed you, and I failed Sophia. The surgery is scheduled for next month, and I don't have the money. Victor revoked the bonus because I wouldn't sign the log saying you were violent. Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph of a little girl with a bright, gap-toothed smile. This is her. She's the best part of me, and I was willing to let you suffer to save her. I'm a terrible person, aren't I? Eunice's heart broke. She watched as Maya's tears fell onto the photograph. But I couldn't do it, Maya sobbed. I looked at you, and I saw my own mother. I saw a woman who worked her whole life for people who don't deserve her. I'd rather lose Sophia than lose my soul by helping them kill yours. Maya stood up, wiping her eyes. I'm going to help you. I have a cousin with a car. We're going to get you out of here tonight. We'll go to the authorities. We'll go to the press. We'll find someone who hasn't been bought by Victor. Eunice reached out. It was the first time she had moved in 21 days. She grabbed Maya's wrist with a strength that made the girl gasp. Eunice looked Maya directly in the eye, the vacant look replaced by a fire that was terrifying in its intensity. She didn't speak, but she squeezed Maya's hand once, twice, a signal. Stay. Trust me. Maya froze, her breath hitching. Mrs. Williams? You can move and talk. Eunice gave a single, slow nod. She picked up a notepad from the nightstand and wrote 3 words in a sharp, elegant script. Tomorrow. The reveal. Maya stared at the paper, then back at Eunice. A slow realization dawned on her face. She didn't scream. She didn't cry out. She simply knelt beside the bed and rested her head on Eunice's hand. They have no idea, Maya whispered, a half-laugh, half-sob escaping her lips. They have no idea who they are dealing with. Eunice looked at the door. The vultures were finished. Tomorrow, the queen would reclaim her throne, and the silence would finally be broken. The morning of the guardianship hearing arrived with a sky the color of lead. The Williams mansion was a hive of activity, but it was a frantic energy of people preparing to divide a kill. Victor was in his study, adjusting his silk tie and rehearsing his testimony before a mirror. Isabella was in the foyer, barking orders at the movers to begin tagging the excess furniture for auction. Jerome was nowhere to be found, likely nursing a hangover in the back of a town car. Eunice was dressed by Maya in a simple high-neck black dress. She looked frail, her silver hair pulled back into a severe bun, her hands resting limply in her lap. But beneath the mask, Eunice was a coiled spring. Are you ready? Maya whispered, kneeling to adjust Eunice's shoes. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wide with the weight of the secret they shared. Eunice didn't nod, but she squeezed Maya's hand once, a firm, grounding pressure. The cars are here, Victor announced, appearing in the doorway. He didn't look at his mother. He looked at his watch. Maya, Get her in the back of the SUV. And for God's sake, make sure she doesn't make any noise in the courtroom. I don't need a scene. The drive to the courthouse was a study in coldness. Victor and Isabella sat in the back of the lead car, discussing the stock prices of Thorne Industries as if their mother wasn't sitting 3 feet away. They talked about her as if she were already dead, debating whether to keep her portrait in the boardroom or replace it with a more modern logo. The courtroom was packed. The board of directors, the press, and the rival CEO, Aries Thorne, were all in attendance. Judge Miller, a man with a face like crumpled parchment and eyes that had seen too many bribes, sat behind the high bench. This is a hearing to determine the legal guardianship of Eunice Williams. The judge began, his voice droning. The petitioners, Victor, Jerome, and Isabella Williams, claimed total psychological incapacity. Victor took the stand first. He was a master of the grieving son performance. "It breaks my heart, Your Honor," Victor said, dabbing at his eyes with a linen handkerchief. "My mother was a lioness. But after the accident, the fire just went out. She hasn't spoken a word in weeks. She doesn't recognize us. She can't even feed herself. To leave her in control of a global corporation is not just irresponsible, it's dangerous for the thousands of employees who depend on us." Isabella followed, her testimony a scripted masterpiece of feigned tragedy. "She sits in the dark for hours, Your Honor. She doesn't even know when it's raining. We just want her to be at peace in a facility where professionals can handle her decline." Then came the medical evidence. The bribed doctor presented his falsified scans and reports, painting a picture of a brain that had effectively shut down. "And finally," Victor said, glancing toward the back of the room, "we would like to call the live-in nurse, Maya. She has kept a daily log of the patient's condition." Maya walked to the stand. Her legs were shaking, and the room went silent as she took the oath. Victor leaned forward, his eyes boring into her, a silent reminder of the bonus, and the threat he had held over her. "Maya," the judge said, "does the patient show any signs of cognitive function? Does she speak? Does she recognize her children?" Maya looked at Victor. Then she looked at Isabella. Finally, she looked at Eunice, who sat in the front row, her gaze fixed on the floor. "No," Maya said, her voice cracking. "She doesn't recognize them." Victor smiled. "But," Maya continued, her voice suddenly growing loud and clear, "it's not because she's sick. It's because she finally sees them for who they really are." The courtroom erupted. Judge Miller banged his gavel, his face turning a deep shade of red. "Order! Order in the court! Young lady, you are under oath. What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for 21 days I watched these 3 people abuse, neglect, and plot against their mother," Maya shouted over the din. "I watched Victor pour ice water over her head to test her. I watched Isabella try to pull her wedding ring off with a pair of pliers. I heard them plot with Aries Thorne to sell the company for scraps." "She's lying!" Jerome screamed, standing up from the gallery. "She's a disgruntled employee. We fired her this morning." "I have the logs," Maya said, pulling a notebook from her bag. "But not the ones Victor told me to write. I have the real ones. And I have this." Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a small digital voice recorder. She pressed play. Victor's voice filled the room. "She won't last a year in a facility like that. By the time anyone notices she's gone, Williams Global will be a memory." The silence that followed was absolute. Victor looked like he had been struck by lightning. Isabella hid her face in her hands. Judge Miller looked at the recorder, then at Victor. The bribe he had taken was no longer enough to protect him from the scandal unfolding in front of the press. "Mrs. Williams," the judge said, his voice trembling, "do you have anything to say to these allegations?" Eunice didn't move. For a long, terrifying second, it seemed as if she truly was gone. Then, slowly, she stood up. She turned her head, her gaze sweeping over the courtroom until it landed on Victor. The vacant look was gone. In its place was a fire that made the eldest son take a physical step back. "The silence," Eunice said, her voice low and resonant, echoing in the rafters like a bell, was the loudest thing I have ever heard. She walked toward the bench, her stride firm and commanding. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a judge. "Your Honor," Eunice said, standing before the bench. "My children thought they were measuring me for a coffin. They didn't realize they were digging their own graves." She turned to the gallery, her eyes landing on Aries Thorne. "Aries, your merger is dead, and your career will follow shortly. I have the recordings of your meetings with my son. You will be hearing from the sect by morning." She looked at her 3 children. Jerome was slumped in his seat. Isabella was trembling. Victor was trying to find an exit, but the bailiffs were already blocking the doors. "You wanted a legacy," Eunice said, her voice dripping with a mother's cold, sharp grief. "Well, you've earned it. You've earned the legacy of being the children who sold their mother for a stock price. You will be stripped of your titles, your shares, and your names. You are no longer part of this family." "Mom, please." Isabella sobbed, reaching out. "We were just scared. We didn't know." "You knew exactly what you were doing when you grabbed those pliers, Isabella," Eunice said, her eyes fixed on the pearls around her daughter's neck. "Give me my pearls." Shaking, Isabella unclipped the necklace and handed it over. Eunice took them, the cold silk of the gems a reminder of a life she had to rebuild. Judge Miller didn't even wait for a closing argument. Petition for guardianship is denied. Case dismissed. And based on the evidence provided, I'm ordering an immediate criminal investigation into Victor, Jerome, and Isabella Williams for elder abuse and conspiracy to commit fraud. As the bailiffs moved in to escort her children away, Eunice turned to Maya. The young nurse was standing by the witness stand, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking from the adrenaline. Eunice walked over and took Maya's hands, the warm, callous hands that had been her only comfort in the dark. "You saved more than a company today, Maya," Eunice whispered. "I just couldn't let them kill you," Maya sobbed. "And I won't let your sister wait another day," Eunice said. She turned to Mr. Henderson, who had appeared by her side. "Arthur, Sophia's surgery is the first priority, and the second is a foundation. I want Maya to lead the board. We need someone who knows that people aren't furniture." Eunice walked out of the courtroom, the flashbulbs of the paparazzi blinding, the roar of the crowd deafening. She was the Iron Queen again, but as she looked at Maya walking beside her, she realized she was something even better. She was a survivor who had finally found her soul. The Williams mansion didn't feel like a tomb anymore. It felt like a museum of a life Eunice was finished living. In the weeks following the trial, the Iron Queen worked with a surgical precision that even her youngest rivals admired. She didn't just fire her children. She surgically removed them from the empire she had built. The criminal proceedings were swift. Victor was facing 10 years for conspiracy and fraud. Isabella, stripped of her social standing, was forced to sell every designer gown and heirloom she had stolen just to pay her legal fees. Jerome, the weakest of the 3, had fled the country, leaving behind nothing but a trail of gambling debts and a hollow name. Eunice sat in her study, the mahogany desk now clear of the vulture's debris. She looked at the gold-framed photographs of her children and, one by one, turned them face down. "It's time, Arthur," Eunice said to her lawyer as he entered. "The papers for the foundation are ready." "They are," Henderson replied, placing a heavy folder on the desk. "The Williams Global Foundation is now a separate entity. It holds 40% of the company's shares. No one, not even a future CEO, can touch that money. It belongs to the hospitals and the clinics now. And the house?" "Sold," Henderson said with a small smile. "The offer from the city was accepted. It's going to be a transitional home for elderly victims of neglect. They are calling it Eunice's Sanctuary." Eunice stood up and walked to the window. She looked down at the garden where she had once watched Victor and Isabella play as children. She had spent 30 years building walls to protect them, and those same walls had eventually hidden their rot. She wasn't sad to see the mansion go. She was relieved. "Where is Maya?" Eunice asked. "She's at the hospital," Henderson said. Sophia came out of surgery an hour ago. The doctor said a repair was a complete success. She'll have a full, healthy life. Eunice felt a weight lift from her heart that she hadn't realized she was carrying. Get the car, Arthur. I want to see my daughter. The pediatric recovery wing of the city hospital was a place of quiet beeps and hushed whispers. Eunice walked down the hall, her presence drawing gazes not because of her wealth, but because of the sharp, newfound light in her eyes. She found Maya sitting in a plastic chair outside a glass-walled room. The girl looked exhausted, her blue uniform wrinkled, her hair a mess. When she saw Eunice, she tried to stand up, but Eunice hurried forward and pushed her back down into the seat. Sit, Maya, Eunice whispered, pulling her into a fierce embrace. You've done enough standing for a lifetime. She's okay, Maya sobbed into Eunice's shoulder. She woke up and asked for a juice box. She's actually okay. Eunice pulled back and looked at the little girl through the glass. Sophia looked small and pale, but her breathing was steady, the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest a miracle of modern science and one nurse's stubborn loyalty. Maya, Eunice said, her voice turning serious. I told you in the courtroom that I wanted you to lead the foundation. I wasn't just speaking for the press. I need someone who knows that medicine isn't about profit margins. I need someone who remembers the silent witnesses in the corners. I don't know anything about running a foundation, Mrs. Williams, Maya said, wiping her eyes. I'm just a nurse. You're a woman who chose a soul over $10 million, Eunice replied. That makes you more qualified than anyone I've ever met. I'll teach you the rest. A year later, a small cottage on the coast of Maine sat bathed in the golden light of a summer sunset. It was a modest house, made of weathered wood and stone, with a garden that smelled of sea salt and wild roses. Eunice sat on the porch swing, a handmade quilt over her legs, the same faded quilt Maya had wrapped around her during the freezing nights in the mansion. She wasn't the Iron Queen anymore. She was just Eunice. The sound of laughter drifted up from the beach. Sophia was running through the surf, her heart now strong enough to keep up with her dreams. Maya followed close behind, her face glowing with a peace that can only be bought with an honest conscience. Eunice's phone buzzed on the side table. It was a request for an interview from a major financial magazine. The Secret to the Williams Legacy, the headline read. Eunice picked up the phone and typed a single-sentence reply. The secret to a legacy is realizing that wealth is what stays in the room when you stop speaking. She turned the phone off and let it slide into the grass. She didn't need the world to hear her voice anymore. She had built a new kingdom, one built on truth, sacrifice, and the daughter she had found in the shadows of a cold kitchen. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Eunice closed her eyes. The silence was no longer a cage. It was peace. Eunice Williams went into that kitchen looking for her family, and she found a daughter she never expected. She learned that the loudest voices are often the emptiest, and the truest hearts are the ones that speak when no one else is listening. Victor and Isabella thought they were the masters of the house, but they ended up as prisoners of their own greed. Because in the end, life doesn't ask how much you own. It asks who you were when the lights went out. So, a question for you today. If your life depended on the kindness of a stranger, would you be proud of the way you've treated the silent moments in your life? Let us know in the comments. Your story might be the one that stays someone else's soul. Don't forget to like and subscribe to SoulStir Stories. We bring you the justice and the heart the world often forgets. Thank you for watching. And remember, the truth always finds a way to be heard.